She was sitting in her 40-square-meter closet, surrounded by handbags that cost more than popular cars, crying uncontrollably at 3 in the morning. Her millionaire husband was sleeping in the next room. Her healthy children were resting in their bedrooms, decorated by renowned architects. The beach house was paid off. The apartment in Paris, too. But none of that mattered at that moment. Because for the 10th time that month, she felt such a deep emptiness that it seemed to suck her soul into a bottomless black hole. And the worst part, she couldn't explain why. This scene repeats itself in millions of homes around the world. Women who seemingly have achieved everything society promises as the synonym of happiness: stable relationships, financial security, children, professional recognition, beauty, health. But there is a disturbing phenomenon happening silently. The more they seem to have, the more dissatisfied they become. And we're not talking about isolated cases. We're talking about a recurring pattern so widespread that it can no longer be ignored. The inconvenient truth is that there is an epidemic of female unhappiness sweeping through the modern world. And it doesn't discriminate by social class, educational level, or age. It affects the successful executive just as much as the suburban housewife. It reaches the influencer with millions of followers as much as the retired teacher. The common denominator? They all share a constant feeling that something is missing, even when objectively nothing is missing. For decades, we were taught to believe that this dissatisfaction was the fault of a patriarchal society. That once women achieved financial independence, sexual freedom, and equal rights, they would finally find inner peace. But something strange happened. All these achievements were attained in much of the Western world, and yet the rates of female depression, anxiety, and unhappiness have only increased. How is that possible? The answer goes far beyond the simplistic explanations you've heard. It's not just about unbalanced hormones. It's not just about social pressure. And it's definitely not about a lack of opportunities or rights. The reality is much deeper and, at the same time, much simpler than we imagine. There is a triad of invisible forces shaping the female psyche since childhood, creating a mental program that sabotages any possibility of genuine satisfaction. The first force is biological. Recent studies in neuroscience reveal that the female brain has a greater natural tendency toward pessimism and focusing on potential problems. This is not sexism disguised as science. It's an evolutionary trait that ensured the survival of the species for millennia. Mothers who could anticipate danger and identify problems before they happened were better at protecting their children. But that same trait, when displaced into a modern world full of artificial stimuli, becomes a machine that creates imaginary worries. The female brain is constantly scanning the environment for threats, problems, and possible future catastrophes. While men tend to compartmentalize and focus on one thing at a time, women keep dozens of concerns active simultaneously in their minds. This generates chronic mental overload that corrodes the ability to feel gratitude or satisfaction for what already exists. It's like trying to appreciate a beautiful landscape while an alarm keeps ringing inside your head. But biology is just the beginning of the story. The second force comes from childhood, especially from the relationship with the father. Here lies a secret that most women have never consciously connected. The way their father treated them in childhood created an emotional mold they spend their entire lives trying to fill through adult relationships. If the father was absent, she seeks constant attention. If he was critical, she seeks eternal validation. If he was controlling, she oscillates between submission and rebellion. If he was neglectful, she feels she doesn't deserve love. This emotional mold functions like software running in the background, dictating automatic reactions that the conscious mind cannot control. That's why intelligent and successful women often find themselves repeating the same destructive patterns in different relationships. They're not consciously choosing problematic men. They're being guided by a program installed decades ago, trying to solve an emotional equation that was never resolved with the father. If you're realizing that this content is revealing things no one talks about openly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos. And there's more. Many of these women were raised by equally unhappy mothers. Daughters of frustrated mothers learn by osmosis that being a woman means carrying a burden of perpetual dissatisfaction. They watch their mothers complain about their husbands, sigh for the life they could have had, and cultivate silent resentments that poison the family environment. And thus, without realizing it, they absorb the subliminal message that happiness is not something realistic to expect from life. But the third force is even more devastating because it operates in the present, every day, every minute, modern culture. Social media has created a psychological prison without precedent in human history. For the first time in the evolution of the species, women spend hours every day comparing their real lives to the edited, filtered, and staged versions of hundreds of other people's lives. The brain did not evolve to handle this. It interprets every image of paradise vacations, every photo of an apparently perfect relationship, every shared achievement as evidence that one's own life falls short of what it should be. This constant comparison triggers the same neural circuits of envy and inadequacy that our ancestors felt when observing more successful members of their small tribes. But now, instead of comparing themselves with 10 or 20 people, they compare themselves with thousands. And all those people are showing only the best 1% of their lives. It's a mathematically impossible competition to win. Modern feminism, with all its good intentions, also contributes to this psychological trap by preaching the message that women can and should have it all. A successful career, a passionate relationship, well-raised children, a perfect body, a vibrant social life, fulfilling hobbies, and still time for self-care and personal growth. This impossible expectation turns every choice into a painful renunciation and every achievement into a reminder of everything that has not yet been accomplished. So now we have a woman with a biological predisposition to focus on problems, carrying unresolved emotional wounds from childhood, being bombarded daily with messages that her life should be different and better. This cocktail is the perfect recipe for chronic unhappiness. And the most tragic result of all? She begins to project all that internal frustration onto her partner, turning him into the one responsible for filling a void he never had the power to fill. And this is where the problem becomes truly destructive for relationships. The man enters the relationship believing his role is simple: to provide, protect, and be present. He thinks that if he works hard, shows affection regularly, and solves the practical problems of life as a couple, that will be enough. But he soon discovers that he's playing a game whose rules change constantly without warning. What made her happy last week now irritates her. The romantic gesture she praised last month is now criticized as insufficient or inappropriate. This confusing pattern happens because he doesn't understand that he's not dealing with rational requests based on real needs. He's dealing with an insatiable emotional void that uses the relationship as a stage for its expression. She herself doesn't know what she really wants, because what she seeks doesn't exist in the external world. It's a feeling of completeness that can only come from within, but her entire mental programming is set to look for that completeness through him. Then the destructive dance begins. She asks for more attention, and he gives it. But now she feels suffocated and asks for space. He gives her space, and she feels neglected. She wants him to be more romantic. He buys flowers and plans special dinners. But then she complains that he's not spontaneous enough, that he seems to be following a script. He tries to be more spontaneous, and she accuses him of being unpredictable and not taking her need for planning and security seriously. Every attempt he makes to satisfy her fails because her dissatisfaction doesn't originate from him. It's like trying to put out a fire by throwing water on a photograph of flames. The problem isn't where he's trying to fix it. But he doesn't know that. So he tries harder. He works overtime to give her the lifestyle she says she wants. He sacrifices his hobbies, his friends, his rest. He repeatedly puts her needs above his own, believing that eventually this will be recognized and appreciated. But here's the part that will shock you: the more he sacrifices, the less she respects him. The more he bends to her demands, the less she desires him. This happens because that evolutionary programming in the female brain is seeking strength, not submission. She may consciously ask for a man who always puts her first, but unconsciously she loses attraction for men who do exactly that. It's a psychological contradiction that destroys relationships without either of them understanding what's happening. The man begins to feel like an emotional slave. He works, provides, tries to please, but it's never enough. The criticism never stops. The complaints pile up. He's too cold or too needy, too ambitious or not motivated enough, too present or too absent. No matter what he does, there's always a list of what's missing or wrong. And the worst part is that this list constantly changes, so he can never truly get it right. And she, on the other side, is also suffering. Because she genuinely doesn't understand why she keeps feeling unhappy. She looks at her life and sees that she has a dedicated partner, that she's achieved many things, that objectively her situation is good. But the emptiness persists. And since she can't identify the real source of that emptiness, she keeps pointing to external factors. If only he were more like this, if only they lived somewhere else, If only she got that promotion, if only the kids behaved better, if only life weren't so busy. This inability to take responsibility for her own happiness creates a vicious cycle. Every time she projects the blame for her unhappiness onto external factors, she becomes more powerless to change it. Because if the cause is always outside, then the solution is also always outside her control. So she remains stuck in an eternal wait for external circumstances to magically align in a way that finally makes her feel complete. The fairy tales she consumed throughout childhood and adolescence feed this dangerous fantasy. Cinderella was rescued by the prince and lived happily ever after. Sleeping Beauty was awakened by a kiss and all her problems disappeared. Snow White was saved and got her happy ending. The subliminal message is always the same. Female happiness depends on a man doing something for her, never on her doing something for herself. This cultural conditioning creates a victim mentality disguised as romance. She expects to be rescued, discovered, saved, completed by someone. And when her partner inevitably fails to be this mythical savior, she feels deceived, that she was promised a fairy tale and given an ordinary life instead. And somehow, that's his fault for not living up to the fantasy planted in her mind since she was 5 years old. Then she begins to fantasize about alternatives. Did she choose the wrong man? Is there someone out there who would finally make her feel the way she thinks she's supposed to feel? Social media feeds this fantasy by showing seemingly perfect couples, relationships that appear to have none of the problems hers does. She doesn't see the fights, frustrations, financial troubles, betrayals, or divorces that will come. She only sees the edited and polished version, which makes her own relationship seem inferior by comparison. The tragedy is that if she ends this relationship and starts another, the pattern will simply repeat itself. Because the problem travels with her. It's programmed into her neurology, engraved in her childhood memories, reinforced daily by the culture around her. The next man also won't be able to fill the void. He too will be criticized, pressured, deemed insufficient. Because the void isn't his responsibility. It never was. Now we reach the most difficult point to accept, but also the most liberating. There is a lie that has been sold for decades that needs to be exposed. The idea that happiness is a permanent feeling you achieve when external circumstances are perfect. This lie is the fuel that drives the entire self-help industry, all modern advertising, all lifestyle marketing. And it is also the reason why millions of women remain unhappy even after achieving everything they thought they needed to be happy. The brutal reality is that happiness is not a destination. It is a temporary byproduct of specific actions and mental states that need to be cultivated daily. No one wakes up happy every day simply because they have a good job, a stable relationship, and a beautiful home. These things can provide security, comfort, even moments of joy. But they do not guarantee the internal state of contentment that most people are seeking. And here is the crucial point: women have been taught to outsource their happiness. To expect it to come from external sources. The perfect relationship will make me happy. A successful career will make me happy. Children will complete me. The ideal body will give me confidence. Social approval will validate me. Each of these beliefs transfers power over one's own well-being to something or someone outside oneself. And this is a devastating psychological trap. When you condition your happiness on the approval or behavior of another person, you become an emotional hostage to that person. When you believe you need to achieve certain external goals to feel fulfilled, you turn life into a race with no finish line. Because there will always be the next goal, the next achievement, the next milestone that promises to finally bring inner peace. But that peace never comes because you are looking in the wrong place. What is truly frightening is realizing how many women spend entire decades without ever questioning this programming. They simply accept that unhappiness is part of the female condition. They see their mothers unhappy, their friends dissatisfied, women around them constantly complaining, and assume that this is how things are. They normalize psychological suffering as if it were as inevitable as gravity. But there is a fundamental difference between women who manage to break this pattern and those who remain trapped in it. And this difference has nothing to do with external circumstances. It has everything to do with personal responsibility. Women who escape this trap are those who eventually stop pointing the finger outward and begin to look inward. They stop expecting the world to adjust to their expectations and start adjusting their expectations to reality. This does not mean passively accepting bad situations or abusive relationships. It means understanding that no one else can do the inner work that only you can do. Your partner cannot heal your childhood wounds. Your career cannot fill the emotional void left by an absent father. Your material achievements cannot replace the self-acceptance you never developed. Instagram cannot give the validation you need to learn to give yourself. The inconvenient truth is that most women do not want to hear this. Because taking full responsibility for one's own happiness is frightening. It is far more comfortable to blame the partner, society, the system, the circumstances. Blaming external factors keeps you in the victim position, and being a victim has its psychological benefits. You receive sympathy, don't have to change, and can continue complaining without needing to take action. But here is the price of that choice: you remain trapped. Because if the solution is always outside your control, you will never have real power to change your situation. You remain eternally dependent on others changing, on circumstances improving, on some external event finally bringing the happiness you are waiting for. And in the meantime, the years pass. Relationship opportunities dwindle. Youth fades. And unhappiness only deepens. The men who are in relationships with these women also pay a very high price. They become emotional scapegoats, absorbing blame for problems they didn't create and cannot solve. Many of them spend years believing they are inadequate, that something is missing in them, that if they were somehow better they could finally make their partners happy. That guilt eats away at them from the inside, destroys their self-esteem, turning confident men into empty shells of anxiety and self-doubt. And the most tragic part is that when these men finally free themselves from these toxic relationships, they are often so damaged that it takes years to recover. They have developed submissive behavioral patterns, lost the ability to set healthy boundaries, internalized the belief that they will never be enough. Some never fully recover. They carry the scars into future relationships or simply give up on seeking deep connections. But here is something few have the courage to admit: this dynamic benefits no one. It doesn't benefit the woman, who remains trapped in cycles of perpetual dissatisfaction. It doesn't benefit the man, who becomes an unrecognized emotional servant. It doesn't benefit the children, who grow up observing a dysfunctional relationship model. It doesn't benefit society, which loses productivity and collective mental health to this epidemic of unhappiness. So why does this pattern persist? Why do so many people remain trapped in this destructive dance even when it's obvious it's not working? The answer is simple and at the same time profound: because real change requires admitting uncomfortable truths about oneself. It requires letting go of victim narratives that have become part of your identity. It requires hard psychological work with no guarantee of immediate results. And most people simply are not willing to do that. But there is a way out. And it begins with a simple truth that goes against everything modern culture teaches: you are completely responsible for your own happiness. Not partially responsible. Not co-responsible along with your partner or your circumstances. Totally, absolutely, non-negotiably responsible. And this applies to both women and men. This is the only truth that can free someone from this psychological prison. For women trapped in this pattern of chronic dissatisfaction, liberation begins when they stop expecting something external to fix them. When they finally accept that the internal void will not be filled by a better relationship, a more impressive career, or greater material achievements. This void can only be addressed from the inside out, through genuine self-knowledge and consistent emotional work. This means confronting childhood wounds instead of simply projecting them onto current partners. It means questioning messages absorbed from unhappy mothers and recognizing that you do not need to repeat their patterns. It means turning off social media when it begins to fuel toxic comparisons. It means consciously choosing to focus on what you have instead of constantly chasing what you do not have. It means understanding that healthy relationships are not about finding someone who completes you, but about two already complete people choosing to share their lives. When you stop using your partner as a remedy for your emotional void, you can finally see them as they really are. You can appreciate their genuine efforts instead of constantly measuring how they fall short of your impossible expectations. You can build real intimacy instead of a theater of unmet needs. For men on the other side of this dynamic, liberation comes from understanding something radical: you cannot and should not try to make another person happy. You can be kind, present, respectful, committed. But her happiness is not your job. It never was. And when you finally stop taking responsibility for emotions that are not yours, you regain your own vital energy. This is not selfishness. It is mental sanity. It means establishing healthy boundaries where you do not automatically absorb every complaint, criticism, or dissatisfaction as evidence of your inadequacy. It means recognizing when you are being used as an emotional scapegoat and having the courage to name it. It means being willing to leave relationships where you are constantly held accountable for problems you did not create. It means stopping the self-sacrifice in the hope that it will eventually be recognized and appreciated. Because in dynamics where dissatisfaction is chronic and internal, no amount of sacrifice will ever be enough. You can give your all and still be considered insufficient. So it is better to preserve your mental health and personal integrity than to consume yourself trying to fill a bottomless pit. The most important truth that emerges from all this is that healthy relationships are only possible between people who have already taken responsibility for their own happiness. When two people enter a relationship expecting the other to fix them, save them, complete them, the result is always disaster. But when two already whole people choose to build something together, the dynamic transforms completely. In this type of relationship, conflicts still exist. Challenges arise. Difficult moments happen. But the fundamental difference is that neither is constantly blaming the other for their internal emotional state. Each recognizes that they brought their own baggage, their own wounds, their own responsibilities to the relationship. And each is committed to working on their own issues instead of projecting them onto their partner. This creates space for genuine gratitude. When you are not constantly focused on what is missing, you can finally see and appreciate what is present. When you are not measuring your partner against impossible fairy tale fantasies, you can value the real efforts they make every day. When you are not chasing an edited version of a perfect life on social media, you can find satisfaction in the imperfect but genuine reality of your own existence. For society as a whole, recognizing this truth could completely transform how we educate future generations. We could teach girls from an early age that they are responsible for creating their own happiness, instead of waiting to be rescued. We could teach boys that they do not need to completely sacrifice themselves to be worthy of love. We could create a culture where self-knowledge and emotional responsibility are valued above external appearances and material achievements. But until this happens on a larger scale, each individual can make this choice for themselves. They can decide to stop participating in this destructive dance. They can choose to take full responsibility for their own emotional well-being. They can commit to doing the hard inner work that no one else can do for them. So here is the final lesson. Chronic unhappiness is not something that happens to you. It is something you allow to continue. Whether through ignorance of the patterns you are repeating, refusal to do the work necessary to change them, or attachment to victim narratives that have become comfortable. But in all cases, the power to change has always been in your hands. Always has been. And if you have made it this far and truly understood the depth of what has been shared, leave your subscription to the channel. Because understanding is only the first step. Applying these truths in your own life is the real work. And the more people awaken to these patterns, the more we can build genuinely healthy relationships based on mutual responsibility instead of toxic emotional dependence. The choice has always been yours. It always will be.